I'll figure out.
I mean, I do have some language on the agenda from finance. Yeah, I'll check finance.
That's just the.
Oh,
the
thank
backup
you.
document.
Yeah, check, I do have, and you'll see that we acted upon just some discussions, two discussion topics. Yeah, check that, and see if that works. I mean, you know, I didn't even.
Charlie, would you? And was the formula what they discussed, but I didn't know that as a concern to the school board council.
Okay.
That's not right.
That's good.
Well, you're all set, sir.
I would like to call the special committee on health, opportunity, prosperity, and education, vote to order for Thursday, February 13th, 2025. It's approximately 5:39. Madam Clerk, if you could please call the roll.
Chairman Machado,
Present.
Vice Chairwoman Peterson,
Present.
Councilor Engelmann is absent, Councilor Ruiz,
Present.
Councilor Sanchez is absent, 3 present, 2 absent, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, and thank you, committee. I also would like to recognize Chairwoman Helen Anthony with the meeting, and also one of the co-sponsors of the resolution before us. And that resolution before us is in support of the recommendations from the Special Senate Commission to review and provide recommendations for professional and labor management standards that offer school-based flexibility, accountability for employees of the Providence Public Schools, and the potential application of an entire education empowerment zone to the city of Providence. So with that said, a couple of invited guests to speak today. Before us, we have and welcome Matthew Montero from the Empowerment Schools. Welcome. And also our education consultant and colleague of ours, Stephen Smith, for the Providence City Council. Before we take and open it up for discussion, there is a substitute, and I'd like to entertain a motion to into this substitute with an amended heading. The motion has been made by Councilwoman Shelley Peterson, seconded by Councilman Justin Royce. All those, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? The motion carries. Before us, as approved, is the resolution that was amended with the title, Resolution in Support of the Recommendations from the Special Senate Commission to Review and Provide Recommendations for Professional and Labor Management Standards that offer school-based flexibility and accountability for employees of the Providence Public Schools and the potential application of customized organizational models in the city of Providence. Before we open it up and get a presentation and remarks from potentially Stephen Smith and also then Matthew Montero, I'd like to just open it up for colleagues if you wanted to say something prior to hearing from them. Seeing none?
I would just say I sat on the commission and, supported the majority of the report. I think the empowerment sort of zones, if you will, I think would do wonders in Providence.
Thank you. Councilwoman Helen is with us. Would you like to, Helen Anthony?
I'm very, as you know, very supportive of this, of the work, and thank you very much, Councilor Boreas, for serving on the Special Senate Commission. You know, I think this is a crucial piece of the very complex return to local control. We have to have, I think, some legislative changes in order to basically set the table for a more successful running of our school system. And so I'm just grateful for this committee hearing it. I'm grateful for the work, grateful for Mr. Matera for coming to share his experiences with us. And anyway, I'm just very, very supportive of it. Thank you.
Thank you. And as we had a presentation from Senator Sanzurio, who led the Senate committee to study and come up with a report. We had him here in our last meeting. We commend him for his leadership there. As we know, he has a history with the private school system as a student and as a private school board and city council, now a state senator. We are all invested in our public school systems to make sure that we get the opportunity to get out our schools local control as soon as possible. We have endorsed the mayor's goals and it's our goal to get our schools for 2025. And also it is the opportunity to help us bring our education system and improving them for our families and our students. So I also like to commend Justin Royce, Councilman Justin Royce, who was also a member of that committee. Miguel Youngs also represented us there. He was very favorable in keeping us informed. As we have also been involved in the community, especially attending the mayor's outreach and engagement to ensure that the communities have had the opportunity to speak their mind and see what the future of the local control, what does that look like? He just issued a report that we all should have in our email or in our inbox. It's called the Mayor's Education Community Engagement Report, so look for that. For those of you who might be seeing this or hearing this, there's a link within the mayor's website that you can go there and also read the report. I know that most of the city council today attended Classical High School's ribbon cutting. Fascinating rehabilitation in the student space, and it's very innovative, very enlightening, and heard from a young lady that is graduating this year. And those are the kind of experiences that I know we're committed to seeing while we serve here at City Council, but also as Providence resident. I know that many of us attended some of these ribbon cuttings and groundbreaking, and also the engagement, especially the young people that had the discussion about the local control. And know that many of us, including Chairwoman Helen Anthony at the Elmo Community Center, we participated in those and hearing out what the young people were saying. So with that said, I would like to recognize Stephen Smith to provide some remarks and also then later on as a secondary, we will also welcome again Mr. Machado. Stephen Smith, the Honorable.
Depends who you're talking to. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief and then I can always answer any questions you may have regarding the resolution. And I know there's been a lot of talk about bringing the schools back to local control, and the mayor's going to have a plan. I would argue that without changes in statute, no plan. And this isn't me being critical of anyone. This is me talking as an old guy who's been there, done that, and bought the t-shirt. Because I tried making substantial, significant change with 3 superintendents. And my journey brings me here today that it finally dawned on me, without changing the rules of the game, so to speak, without changing state statute, which guides pretty much everything you really want to do, the best laid plans are not going to succeed. I will use Commissioner McWalter's testimony before the study commission. through his experience as probably one of the longest serving commissioners of education. And we had our battles. But he said that we're operating under state law that was written last century, specifically designed not to serve all kids.
Mhm.
And that's not in a malicious way, but I was born in 56. In the 50s and 60s, you didn't need an education system that sent everyone to college, that actually graduated everyone from high school. Compound that with the economic realities that urban kids have, and all the issues and challenges that go with being a child in an urban district. This is the be all end all. But without this foundation, I don't think any plan can succeed. I would argue that the state takeover it started with changing state statute, we would have seen a lot more progress. Because you're talking about the way teachers are compensated, the way they're evaluated, the seniority statutes, we were talking in Providence is essential, and they made tremendous headway in recruiting minority candidates. But recruitment is one part of it. Retaining is another. So you have to change the way teachers are compensated. And you can't say to a young man or woman graduating college, come to Providence, and we're gonna give you a job in which maybe in 12 years, you'll be able to start paying off that debt. Oh, by the way, if there's gonna be layoffs, you're the first to go. That doesn't work. But I think this would send a clear message and give one at the tail end of this takeover to move in this direction, but it would also, the city council, which I think should take a leadership role here, can send a clear message to Providence taxpayers, Providence parents, most importantly, and students, that we're going to change the statute and we're going to recommend changes in state law that make sense for 2025, not 1955. If you have any questions, I don't want to take up more of your time.
Thank you.
I'd be happy to answer them, but Matt Matera, who testified before the Senate Study Commission, as well as numerous other experts, has a really, I think, important story to talk about how things can happen with a lot of work in a community that's very similar to ours.
Great, thank you very much. Any questions? And we'll continue to have the presentation. At the end, we'll open it up for some discussion. Before Mr. Patera, I'll give him the floor. I'd like to bring attention to the members that there's a presentation that he's going to be speaking from, and I'd like to have a motion to enter into the record. Item number 1. The motion has been moved, seconded by Councilman Justin Royas. All those in favor? Motion passes. So before us is Mr. Matthew Patera from the Empower Schools, and his presentation to us, local control, I think students first, and educators first. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you everyone for having me. I'm Matt, and as was mentioned, I work at a small nonprofit called Empower Schools. Please interrupt me at any point for questions or comments. And I want to briefly mention, I've had the opportunity to meet some of you before, but briefly mention how honored I am to be here at Providence. I live on the wrong side of the Massachusetts Rhode Island line, sorry, but I married a Rhode Islander, and my oldest son plays in the Rhode Island Youth Philharmonic Orchestra, and so have a lot of love for the state and for the city of Providence. So I really very, very much appreciate your time and engagement and just here to be helpful in any way. So if I'm doing anything that's not helpful, please stop me, and if you have questions, we can, go into that.
Thank you.
But so again, so I work at a small nonprofit called Empower Schools, and I'm a former middle school English teacher. I've worked in Empower for 10 years now, time flies. But right when I started, we were doing a partnership with Springfield, Massachusetts Public Schools. And I didn't put a ton of this in this deck because I wanted to talk more about the conceptual model, but just sort of 30 seconds. I'm a little long-winded, so Steve hit me if I go more than 30 seconds, but in Springfield, there was a set of middle schools that were extremely low performing, unfortunately. And there had been different waves of things tried there. And in 2014, they decided to try what theirs called the Springfield Empowerment Zone Partnership, which has all the schools remaining part of the district, but with a customized operational model where the schools, there was a partnership board formed with members from the mayor was on the partnership board, the school committee vice president, the superintendent, as well as community leaders who came together and said, we want to give schools more decision-making power. And we see our job as being accountable to the school board for the results of what we do. But our job is to help coordinate what's happening in the daily level in the schools and have that coordination put first what the educators in the school building and the families who attend the school want. So that's the backdrop, and I had the privilege of working in partnership with educators and families and students in Springfield for about 3 years, and and then what is neat is that helped catalyze a local effort that has continued to this day, has led to the most improved secondary schools in the state of Massachusetts over the period of that time, and has really, in addition to the quantitative gains, has really revitalized the middle schools and one large high school, which was then added on into the zone early in its history. And it's hard to quantify this, but if you could take a time machine and walk into the schools the first day I did, it was just a depressing place to be, unfortunately. There were lots of wonderful students, lots of hardworking teachers, but there wasn't a lot of optimism and there wasn't a lot of energy. And now they started specialized programs. They have a dual language middle school. I believe the first dual language middle school in Massachusetts, where instruction is in English and Spanish. They started a new program for newcomer high school students that grew from, I think it launched with 15 or 20 kids a couple of years ago, and now they have 300 kids. And but they've been really focused on not warehousing kids. I hate that word, but they're pushing students so that they come to the newcomers program to be prepared to then go into other high schools and succeed. And they've had a lot of success with that. They've started an early college program in Springfield, and there are, it's one of the leading districts in the state now, if not the leading district, for high school students and even sometimes middle school students earning college credit, and meaningful amounts of college credit, so they're working towards careers and feeling fulfilled. And so there's just a lot of great things happening, and it's not fixed yet, right? Because there's still room for more improvement. But I do think that it's to me, it's really inspiring example of educators and families and the district working together to say, how do we create something that's sustainable? That's not that it is embedded in what we're doing at the schools. Because I think one of the challenges is a lot of well-meaning people sometimes come to schools that may be struggling with a solution that worked in one school. It says, if you do this, it's going to work in all the schools. Like, go do this one thing and it'll fix your problem. Because if you visit this school in Springfield or Boston or Tulsa or whatever, you'll see that this school is now doing great because they did these things. Just do that. But the challenge there is, even if that was a great idea, if there's some great ideas there, it may not work with the educators there. They may not be bought into it. It may not actually fit the needs of the students exactly. And I think people tend to feel more invested in something if they feel like they have decision-making power in what they're doing. If they feel like they have a voice and not just some well-meaning person coming in and saying, here's the right thing to do. Thank goodness I'm alive now to tell you the right thing to do, because you've worked in the school 20 years and now I'm here to enlighten you and tell you what you should have been doing. I don't think people appreciate that. You know, I think that they, even if they think those people are well intentioned, and they may not even think they are, they sort of chafe at that and say, who's telling me this is the way to do it? I live here every day. And so I think people much more prefer the opportunity to have, you know, decision-making power with responsibility for results, right? Like, I think it's harder to feel responsibility for what happens in your school if you don't feel like you had any say in the decisions. If people say, hey, you can start a new language middle school, but you better have better attendance strategy, you better improve attendance, you better improve family satisfaction and student satisfaction and have more students reading. That seems much more reasonable than saying, do all those things in this precise way that we told you to do it. So that's my little speech time, but on the deck, how that structure looks. So the first thing is kind of what the headline is, this is the idea is district-driven community partnerships that can empower Providence students and educators. And the idea is really to use democratic practices, collaborative cultures, and transparency, so that decisions are made with input from students, families, and educators. And if you do that, I think you can have district schools that are sustainable, implementing customized models and service holistic goals. So I'm not a marketer, so that's not the catchiest list of things, but I think it's important. Like, district schools is important. That's what we're here to talk about. We care about the Providence district schools, like what we're focused on. To me, the one that actually, because I'm a nerd, gets me the most excited is the sustainable piece. Because one of the things that's really challenging is there may be a school that is doing fabulous things, and sometimes that's because they have a really dynamic principal, and that's awesome. But then that principal might go take a job as a superintendent in another city in Rhode Island, or might go retire, or might go have their partner get transferred to another city and have to leave the state. And there's too many sad stories I see of basically like a parabola of achievement at the school. It's like people worked really hard, it went up, and then the principal left, or some district said the model had to change or something, and it just goes back to how it was before. And so I think that what excites me about the empowerment zone in Springfield is it's not just about one principal or one leader, it's about creating teams of teachers at each school, working with the principal to make decisions and being responsible for sustaining that over time. Principal leadership still matters a lot. Teacher leadership still matters a lot. But the idea is that it's not all based on one superhero making all the change. And if they go, the principal goes, the superintendent goes, whatever, it all falls apart. So, and then customized models, holistic goals. And so, you know, what that looks like, what does that actually mean? Okay, that's my brief statement. On the next slide, it's the operating flexibility for the partnership. And so that means if you have the ongoing right and responsibility to make adjustments in what's happening in your school. So that is, you can do something big, like say, okay, now we're gonna integrate early college throughout our curriculum. Or you can do something small and say, hey, the way we're doing math intervention is not working. We need to redesign how math intervention is working in our schools, because we have students who are falling behind. We need to find opportunities to help support them with math. And we need to change that now. We don't need to go through a long process to figure out how to do that and appeal to the school board and, you know, make all the changes. We need to do that and make those changes soon so that our kids can catch up. And then there's ambitious goals set collaboratively with the district. And so that gets to the important continuing role of the district. There are two big responsibilities in this model. One is they set those goals and hold the operating partners responsible for them. And that they're still the ones in the driver's seat. And then two, sometimes like in Springfield, they also help actually serve supervising those day-to-day decisions, which I think can be really valuable too. So it's not just saying, hey, here's the goals, good luck, report back to me at the end of the year, but here's the goals. We're going to be continually involved in helping you to adjust, to check how things are going, to give advice, to be supportive. So there's a really important role for school boards in this model. They remain part of the district and continue to follow important district policies on things like enrollment. And so this is, the idea is that schools can be customized, but they're good neighbors with other schools, right? Like that they're working collaboratively as part of a system. And that there's an existing or a new nonprofit board with local leaders and community members who help support and advocate for that cluster of schools. And that can look, I'll stop there for a second. Sometimes that's a new entity. In Springfield, it was a new entity that was formed with a board made up of members of the district and community leaders. Another really successful partnership we've been able to work with is in Fort Worth, Texas, where I actually flew back from this morning. There, the partnership is with Texas Wesleyan University, which is an existing university that has a strong presence in the community. And they said, we would like to be your partnership organization, school district. We think we have good ideas for how to support this cluster of schools. And the schools where they have been working are basically 100% students who are experiencing poverty, students who are students of color, and they've been the most improved schools in the district for several years running. Please.
This new board would be in addition to a school board, in addition to a PTO, in addition to whatever community focused group would be a part of the school currently, or with this cluster?
That's a great question. I think that it would be, the short answer is yes, in addition to the school board. And it can integrate with a PTO. You know, it'd be interesting to see what it would look like if a PTO played that role. It would be interesting to look, but I think in Wilmington, Delaware, they have parents on the board of the new entity. They have, but the idea is to continue having the school board at the top of everything, but to have some of those day-to-day decisions move away from the school board, as it's currently constituted. I'm happy to talk more about that, because sometimes people say, is that just adding an unnecessary layer? I think is a question people ask sometimes, and I think if you talk, and I really encourage you to just either visit Springfield or call people there, or I'd be happy to connect you with people at other places. I think they'd say, what is actually allowed is a specialization of roles, not a duplication of roles. So like they've got to be within Springfield saying, here are the things that the school board does and matters a lot. And then the empowerment zone board there is almost like a subcommittee like tonight, you know, like the subcommittee is then playing a specialized role in supporting the schools and reporting back up to the school board. And, you know, in Springfield, there are 2 members of the school board on that subcommittee, and plus the superintendent. So there's, you know, a lot of connectivity, but it's able to sort of say, this is what we're focused on, is providing this particular supervision and making sure that the schools are able to implement the customized models, have the support they need to implement them, and are being held accountable for implementing them well in service of the school goals. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does, thank you.
I just also had a follow-up question. So, is there a reason, so I understand now, the specialization of the roles in the Empowerment Zone Board is kind of a subcommittee of the school board possibly. Why is it in, why clusters of schools? Can this model be applied to, can each school have its own be its own empowerment zone subcommittee, or explain to me why the cluster of the schools and how you reach that decision in Springfield, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think that my concern, if it was each school individually, is it just might get unwieldy to have so many subcommittees. You know, and it's funny because in Springfield, we care very much about the independence of each school. So that each school is reporting out to the Empowerment Zone Board, which is then reporting out to the whole school board. So there's sort of, each school is still having a significant amount of autonomy and flexibility within that structure. But I think the idea was that it would be hard to the capacity at each school to supervise effectively. There'd be too little, differentiation between that supervision and the implementation.
Yeah.
And the supervision and support. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And so, I think that what's nice about and in Springfield, there was sort of a natural cluster when it started, because there was a set of schools they were focused on, so they sort of said, let's create a structure for this. What I'm really intrigued by, this is just me talking, is in Providence, is a big enough district that there could be a few clusters, right? And one of the things that's interesting there is you could potentially have different partners working with you, where you have maybe an existing institution that's your partner in one cluster, and maybe you're having a new community institution in another cluster, and you could even group them either by grade levels or by themes, so there could be different specializations, right? Like there's an opportunity to say, we are gonna have this group that is really, I'm making this up on the fly, so maybe like this group is really focused on creating great pathways to college and career. So they're gonna work with they're gonna have a board that includes either is a higher education institution or is made up of representatives of people from the workforce and higher education institutions to say, we're gonna be really focused on helping make sure students are well prepared to succeed and have a lot of self-determination as Rhode Island's in the future. Or maybe say, we actually want to have a neighborhood focus, and so we're gonna have a cluster in this neighborhood and see out K through 12 in this neighborhood, and we want to be deeply rooted. And I hope I'm not sounding annoying by giving so many options, but the thing is, I don't think there's any right answer. Like, I'd like to see, and I'll just, at the risk of getting too wonky, there's differences even between the Fort Worth and Springfield examples I mentioned. Like, in Fort Worth, the schools have all decided, basically, we want to have a common model. Texas Wesleyan helps create that model. The teachers all opt into it, so there's still determination. They still feel like they have voices at the table, but they're all doing the same basic thing, with some small changes in school, but like there's a lot of coordination. And I think it is working great because everyone's bought in and they feel energized and it's having really good results. In Springfield, each individual school feels very strongly they're learning from each other. They feel like, hey, I'm doing my thing here. Like, I don't want to have the same model as the school across the town. Like, what I value is the chance to create my own model. And so, I think that could develop in different ways in Providence, right? There could be a group of schools that say, we're all interested in the equal language. We'd like to do cluster together. Or there's a group of schools that say, we all want to be clustered because we're in the same neighborhood or grade band, but we also want to have the flexibility to have some variation in how we're running our schools.
So I'm interested in hearing, great, right, in terms of having the clusters or as you're just illustrating it. What about the governance component of it? How does it separate from a school board, even the elected officials, but also having some real empowerment for a member feeling that they're making a difference, right? How, can you speak a little bit about what does that structure look like and what governs it?
A member, you mean a member of the school
Just-
board?
Or even the entity?
Oh, in the entity that.
Yeah,
Oh,
the
yeah.
clusters or
Sure.
the.
So, I think. In Springfield, for example, the people who are on the Springfield Common Zone Partnership Board, I think they feel very empowered as part of governance because they are ultimately responsible for making recommendations on what principals are leaving each school to the superintendent. They are responsible for approving when there's going to be a change in a theme of, the plans that the individual schools are coming forward. They're responsible for monitoring progress. And I think, and I'm so biased on this because I love Springfield, but like, I love the place and I like the model there, but one thing that is interesting is they actually don't meet as often as some governing boards. They actually only meet 5 or 6 times a year. And what they do at those meetings is schools present out about their progress, schools present out about their plans. They present out, they approve a budget for the schools, they approve everything, but the decisions are really living at the schools, not at the governing board. And so they don't have to make a decision on what field trips are happening, or they don't have to make a decision on any of things like that, that their decision is to, you know, who is leading the school and approving the plan that the school comes to with them, and I comes with to them, sorry, I hate using English, but I sometimes get tripped up. But I, you know, and I think one thing that's really interesting to me is I don't think that they have ever not approved a school plan in the time of the apartment zone, because they really are trusting educators. But they have, again, just to be real, they have made changes in principal leadership, or said, you need to have a different plan next year, because, you know, this is not working at the school. Like, it's not meeting our objectives, and we have a responsibility to the school board to meet the goals they set. And what's happening at these schools is great and moving on the right track, but we need to think about something different at this school.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, and that's something that I would like to follow up, just to see, and just as you had indicated in terms of the Springfield model, just the governance, just the way they structured it, so forth. But again, thank you.
Of course, and they report back then to the school board regularly,
Yeah.
and you know, there's nice connectivity in Springfield. You know, it's interesting in Fort Worth. It is the university that is a partner, so there's no school board member who's officially a part of that. But so they have like an informal collaboration there, but it's the university reporting back to the school board. But they've created a good working relationship there where they're coordinating really closely, and I think a lot of it just comes down to being really clear about here's who's making which decisions and what the cadence is of those decisions. And centering as many of those decisions as possible, in my perspective, at the schools with educators. Because I think that lets them feel more like they're agents in what they're doing. All right, so I think I've covered some of this, but you know, the next slide just shows what this could look like. You know, it's managed by a local independent nonprofit. And you can see sort of the map there, that it's the school board has a performance contract with the nonprofit partnership board that is supervising this cluster of schools. And then on the next slide, you know, it's really important that schools have the flexibility to implement the customized models. That, you know, they have a greater control of their budget, greater control of their staffing, greater control of curriculum, their schedule, their culture. You know, I think I told this anecdote the last time I spoke with a couple of you, but when I met with a principal in Springfield, when this first started, I said, you know, you'll have schedule flexibility. And he said, okay, no, we won't. And I said, oh, no, really well. And he said, no, thank you. You seem okay. I asked your random person is here, but I'm not going to have schedule flexibility. And I said, okay, tell me more why you think that. And he said, well, because 1 year, 2 years, I don't remember ago, they told us we have schedule flexibility in the spring. We've got a committee of teachers. We came up with a new schedule that everyone was really excited about. And a week before school started, there was a memo from the central office that said, here is the middle school schedule that all schools will use this school year. And he said, so why would I believe you? Like why would I believe you that that's not going to happen again? And I think the whole idea of this model is to change that so people feel empowered. That's a very, I'm not trying to criticize whoever's leading that, but that's a very disempowering situation for the principal and teachers.
So that, in that example, so the central district there has to be some agreement between central district and the nonprofit, let me just see the partnership board.
Yeah.
On who's making those decisions right off the bat. So I understand now what you're saying. So you have to have a clear delineation of who is responsible for what and who has the ultimate say.
Absolutely. I think that's crucial, and that's where that
I'm
performance.
wondering, like, ooh, yeah,
Sounds like a lot.
well, I mean, it sounds like a lot of work up front. How difficult is it to sit down with these various, like in Springfield, the various, stakeholders to come and to work out whose responsibility is what? Maybe you could just answer that.
It's a great question, and I hear you, like, I think that. My perspective is that as often as possible, for things that are not about like equity or something like that. The decision-making power should be with the schools / the partnership board, like that should be the default in almost every possible situation. Because they're closer to the educators, and I think that's a different world, right? Like there was a principal in Springfield, really great guy, really well liked, and after a few years after a couple years in the empowerment zone. He just basically, there was sort of a mutual decision that like, he likes being told what to do more than he likes making those decisions. And we moved him to a school in Springfield outside of the empowerment zone, where I think he was very happy. You know, because he was a good implementer, but he didn't want to be a decision maker. And I think the idea here is that you want to get. This model is good for the kind of principals and teachers that I think you want to drive change in the city, that want to be making those decisions. And then want to see out what that looks like, right? Like part 2 of my scheduling story is when people finally believed that they could schedule. I went to one school and they said, okay, on the scheduling thing, right now we have block schedules. Like, are you telling me that I could go to shorter class periods? Because I think my teachers would really like that based on everything they said. I think, well, you guys, you have the decision-making power, you know, like that's what you get to choose. And then I wish this sounds fake, but it's so totally true. I think one of the next schools I went to across town, the principal said, okay, it's really interesting. You may or may not know, right now we have block schedules in our middle schools. We don't like a lot of things. Everyone in this building loves the block schedule. Do I have to change from the block schedule or can we keep it? And it was nice because I could say, no, you can keep it. Like, if you don't like it, you can change it. If you like it, you can keep it. Like, you just have to come up with a plan that your educators are invested in, and we'll give you support to help you make that plan. We're not just gonna say, good luck. Like, there's gonna be a lot more support to help you. Looks like you may have a question.
No, it's a thought that's still forming, but I'll get to it at the end, I think.
Okay. Please do, 'cause it-
Yeah, no, but I appreciate the back and forth dialogue on it. I see this from the lens of an independent school. I worked at an independent school for 7 years. This is very much a very similar model that we had utilized there, but understanding the lay of the land with our public schools. It seems like a very tall task to try and to implement, and I'm just trying to think of all of the pieces that would have to work together in order to get it done. So that's just like it's a continued forming thought on it, that's all.
No, it's a super fair point, and it is tall. Look, I would be lying if I said it wasn't a tall. It's hard, but I really just don't think that you're gonna have sustainable change if people don't take that hallway.
I don't disagree with you.
Right, and I think it's either you do that, you know, I've had very nice superintendents, I spent a lot of my time trying to talk to people about why I like this model. And, you know, I had very nice superintendents say, I really like this if I had all great principals, but like my principals aren't that great, honestly, and so I just don't think I can trust them to make these decisions. And like my answer to that is, you gotta either train up your principals or get new ones then.
Right.
Because like why, like if your principals aren't able to operate in a way that's gonna drive change for your students and the families. You're not like telling bad principals what to do, you're just gonna be frustrated because they won't do it as well as you think they should, right? Like if you have, I'm a big sports guy, and if you have like players who can't and coaches who can't do the job. At some point, you either need them to get better, or you need to, you know, you either need a better coach, or you need the coach to learn how to coach more effectively. And I think that's how I feel about principals, right? And if you're just saying, if you have an athletic director at URI saying, oh, I'm so sorry, we lost a bunch of games, but like, my coach isn't very good. So what are you gonna do? Well, we're keeping the coach. Like, well, okay, why? Well, because I'm not 100% sure we can get a better coach, and this coach is, everyone really likes him. Like, I don't think that athletic director would have their job for very long, right? Like, and I think that. So you're absolutely right, but I think that it's a tall order that needs to be stepped up to.
Yes, I don't disagree with you on that point either.
And so, the other one I want to highlight is budget, just because I think people always care a lot about money. One thing that was a big change in Springfield, so there's no real money that came of this, so the size of the pie wasn't any bigger. There were a couple of small state grants to help support transition to the new model. But it was really not like, wow, the Commerce Zone is so flush with cash now or something like that. But it was a huge change in how much money was controlled at the school level versus the district level. So schools went from controlling, and I know this, I'm gonna date myself because I'm thinking 10-year-old numbers now, but like at the time, schools principals told me that they had flexibility over between $100,000 and $400,000 of their budget. Based on how you think about flexibility or how much they were able to use flexibility on some of the federal funds. And then they went, because most of the money was tied up in a staffing formula and all these other specific things that they were told this is what you have to do. And central office costs and things like that. In this model, they went to having control of, from about 10% of their budget, to having control of 80% of their budget, almost. And so it went from a few $100,000s to multiple millions of dollars that they were in control of. And now, that sounds maybe a little more dramatic than it is, because in any school, the biggest expense is still people, right? Like your teachers are gonna always be your biggest expense. So the difference was that they were seeing that on their side of the spending, but there was a lot more flexibility for them. So you can do things like say, we're gonna have more training for teachers to be at the language school. You can say things like, we're gonna change our structures. There was a school in the first year that said, we have a lot of students who are multi-language learners. Like the traditional district staffing model says we should have 2 ELL teachers, like we want to have 4. And like, we're gonna find the money in our budget because now I have more flexibility and I'm prioritizing more teachers who are ELL teachers. And so what I like is that it's not an ask of extra money in an ongoing way, right? Like that, like, yes, this would be great. I was at somebody came to visit the Fort Worth schools and they said, that was so impressive. That was such a great school. If only we had the money they had. And I happen to know that they actually spent $10,000 more per pupil than the Fort Worth schools did. And it's not the money, it's the flexibility in being able to implement the model the way you want to. So there was no huge infusion of cash, right? That was like making it so that it was all gold-plated limousines instead of school buses. You have a question?
No, I think, the money follows the student in Providence. So, I think it's kind of an interesting thought. So it's more a bottom-up decision-making on terms of spending rather than top down. So instead of receiving just the one-size-fits-all from the top, that they're able to make their own budgetary decisions down at the school base, which is interesting. And very impactful, I would think.
I think so. And I'm sorry, I want to get your question.
No.
A worry people have is like, will they just waste it? Right? Like, will people just waste the money? And I think, no, because they're educators and they care first, but also the incentives align, right? Because if you waste it, like, you're not gonna move the goals that you could set. And then you're not gonna be the principal anymore. Right, like, and I think that there's good alignment, it's not only in the students' interest that your school succeed, it's in your interest.
Councilman Justin Reyes and then citizens, what's up there?
Chair, Matthew, I just had a question, when it comes to the schools that, were in this empowerment zone, what were the MLL sort of ratio populations? I don't know if you know that off the top.
I,
of your head.
I can give you an approximation,
Yeah.
so. I think it has shifted even more MLO since then, but in 2014, 15, when this was starting. I think the demographics in Springfield were about 1/3 Black, 2/3, mostly Latino. And, the MLO's number was. I think it, don't quote me on this, but I think maybe 30-40%. So pretty high. But that might be a little higher.
The reason why I asked is like, I'm a school social worker and, I was actually looking at, not in Providence, but in Pawtucket. And was comparable to Providence, and, I'm looking at the amount of MLO students we've had. And it's like, damn near almost 50% in our school, and I'm just saying to my staff, like, it's in the amount of resources needed to get them to proficiency. I mean, growth is one thing, but to get them to proficiency, it takes enormous resources. And, often the dialogue about our schools here is like, oh, Providence keeps failing their students, and then they compare to districts. Well, your district doesn't have over 50% MLO. And that MLO population, that's not a fair comparison, but the amount of resources you need to get them to English and math proficiency is really, really challenging. We just don't have the resources. And so it's encouraging for you to say that like, there's no increase in funding necessarily to implement this model. And that Springfield's sort of comparable in that ratio to Providence, it feels like, approximately. I don't know what.
Well, and your point's really well taken, right? Like, and I think that it's really hard, and I think there is too much blaming at schools sometimes, right? Like, that it's challenging, but it's also. I think there's also room for schools to do better, and I think that the educators in school buildings see that, right? And so what's nice is it just puts them more in the driver's seat so that they have the ability to do things that they want to do, and to follow different paths, right? We totally, all of you should go visit this, I keep talking about the school language middle school. I think it's so cool, like, to see that this just sort of like responded to what the community wanted, right? Like, it's in the most heavily Latino neighborhood in Springfield. And it's the most in-demand school in the city since it started. Like, people like really want to go there. They're really energized by the idea of something that is culturally responsive and also has really high academic expectations. And I think it's and those two things absolutely go really well together, right? Like, and I think that it's heartening to see that you can have that growth, but I also just want to be super honest. And like I told you at the beginning, I'm not a great marketer. Like, this is not a deal. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you as a city, and then the legislature and the governor and the mayor and the school board all said, we want to do everything here. We want to, we pass resolution, they do all of it. It's still going to be incredibly difficult to educate students when 50% are less. That's just going to be hard when students face a lot of pressure from racism and poverty and lots of other factors. It's not going to be easy to be an educator in Providence, principal, a teacher, a social worker, anything. It's not going to be easy. I just think my analogy I use, and you see already, I really like the analogies. Like, I think it lowers the hurdle. Like, there's still a hurdle there, but maybe there's more people, more schools that can get over it if it's 6 inches lower than it was. Like, and you're still gonna have schools that are really struggling, you know, and hopefully you'll figure out how to fix those next, you know what I mean, like, and you'll be able to see what schools are able to embrace this, empowerment and do really great things, and that's absolutely what happened in Springfield, right? Like, there were a couple principals, a few schools that like, were like, wait, we get to make these decisions, and you're like giving us the budgetary flexibility so we can get some support that's actually the support we want and not just support that's chosen for us, like, boom, we're doing this, we're making big progress. And then there were others that it took longer, and there needed to be a new principal, or there needed to be a change in school model or something, and I think what's nice is that they're not looking for the one thing that will fix everything. They're able to say that the schools that are doing great, just keep doing it. Just keep doing it and keep getting better. And then if you're on the right path, we'll figure out what support you need. And if you're really struggling, maybe we need to think about a different model of that school. Or maybe we need something different.
City Solicitor,
Hi,
Rosa Arias Perry.
Thank you, Chairman. Respectfully, I am not a member of the board. I am the city's municipal integrity officer and I staff the board. From the law department. I need some clarity because in my mind, it's a little chaotic. And if you can provide some clarity on how is it a collaborative, how is there collaboration if each cluster, what I'm understanding, each cluster has a group of schools. And each cluster has their own budget, their own curriculum, they can create their own schedule. Each cluster has individual inputs, ideas, and it doesn't seem like a collaboration to me. It seems like each cluster is doing whatever they want. And if they're only meeting 5 or 6 times a year, how is there any collaboration or communication between the clusters? And I also had a question as to how long has Empower Schools been, when was it established?
Okay, so that's an easy question, sorry.
Okay, yeah.
We were established in 2013,
Okay.
14, so.
Okay, thank you.
I started working there about a year after it opened. Relatively new, but no longer brand new.
Right.
To your other question, it's a great question, right? And again, trying to be transparent. No city that I'm aware of has embraced this model, like as a whole citywide model, where there's like 3 or 4 clusters. So this would be breaking this into the ground, right? Like
So in Springfield, there's one cluster.
one cluster.
Okay, okay. So then Empower Schools, so in Springfield, that is like their home base, like the,
That cluster
it's the only cluster, right?
Yes,
Correct.
and in Tower Schools, we don't run it or anything, like we were advisors helping to set up the structure.
Okay,
The partner is
okay,
a different organization called the Springfield Empowerment Zone Partnership, and it's
Okay.
confusing because there's the empower in both.
thank you.
But
Okay.
like, our nonprofit, we don't run anything, we don't like, our goal is not to be decision makers in any way, like we try to be ideally catalysts, right, like, and advisors and supporters. So what I did and my colleagues did in Springfield is we helped to write the performance contract that's on that slide, connecting the school board and the partnership. We helped to sort of staff the new partnership entity in its early days. Right, like to sort of give them advice on how to have successful board meetings, how to have successful board meetings, how to set board goals, how to structure, and that was all just us in an advisory capacity. And then they eventually hired leadership that is not Empower Schools, that is then. They have a very lean staff, but they have a small staff at that partnership entity that is supervising. And they're the ones sort of helping to coordinate across the schools on the daily level, right? So while the board of the partnership entity, we meet 5 or 6 times a year, they have staff of 5 or 6 people, something like that, so.
The
pretty-
board,
The
okay.
board has
Okay, 'cause I was-
hired a staff of 5 or 6 people that are full-time in the school supporting. So they have, you know, somebody whose job is just to be the family liaison for the cluster of schools. They have someone whose job it is to help to meet with the principals so that they can share what they're doing and talk to each other about what's working and what's not working.
Yes, thank you.
Councilwoman.
I'm sorry, this is so interesting.
Yeah.
Unions. So were the unions cooperative with, this, the forming of these clusters?
So Union is a great partner in Springfield.
Okay.
It's my first headline. Again, I'd be very honest. So the part I have not talked about with this is there was some state pressure in Springfield. So for, I think, both the school district and the union, this was the alternative to take over.
Hmm.
So I don't know if they necessarily at the outset would have chosen to do this if it wasn't do this instead of something else. And so the union head, who I think you know, Tim Collins, do you know him?
Yeah.
Is a really colorful character who was the head of the Springfield Union for a really long time. In the first couple of years of the empowerment zone, I would often go to meetings with him, and he would always start and he would say, and I told him, being overly honest here, he would always start, he'd say, he would say, people would say, what do you think of this empowerment zone thing? And he'd say, well, they had a gun to our head and they made us do it. And I love it. And all the teachers love it. And I would say, Tim, could you just say the second half of that? Like, maybe just say the part where you all love it. And I think there's tangible evidence of that. So when they had the gun to their head, they had a modified collective bargaining agreement. And so there's actually 2 CDAs in Springfield, one for the non-empowerment zone schools and one for the empowerment zone schools. And that's the empowerment zone collective bargaining agreement with the gun to the head. I think 90% of teachers, 91% of teachers voted in favor of that. Okay, after 3 years, living under that new CBA with no more gun to the head, everybody knew that there was no more state pressure at that moment. I think it was 93 or 94% of people voted to renew that contract. And then 3 years after that, when there was even less state pressure, if possible, it was 95%. And so as people have lived under that agreement, which mostly just allows for those school level flexibilities that are locked interlinks to give more school level flexibility and clarifies how teachers will have voices at the table in using those flexibilities. It also does pay teachers a little more and extend the school day a little more. Those are the key elements of the contract. But there are other differences too. I can bore you to tears, but those are sort of the biggest differences. More teacher leadership, more flexibility in each individual school, slightly longer days, more pay. Those are the 4 biggest differences between the contracts. But I think that, you know, I think that shows the union's been a really good partner, and I think to the great credit of the staff that the Springfield Empowerment Zone Board hired, they place a huge priority in coordination and cooperation. Like they spend a lot of time working with the union folks to try to help make sure that it's a productive relationship, that teachers feel like they're being heard. I can say, here, I'll talk bad about myself. But in the early days, we were standing up these teacher leadership teams in each school, which was really exciting. It was new and teachers had voices. And I was trying my best to help coordinate that when I was providing support. But when they hired full-time leadership, one of the first things the union said is, we have to do a better job with these teacher leadership teams. Like Matt was trying, but they're not all equal. Some of them, the principals listen more to the teams than they do to others. Like, we need to have clear expectations of how the teacher leadership teams and the principals work together. And I think to the great credit of the staff, they listened and they made that happen, right? And now all those really clear guidelines for the teacher leadership team I think that I think they feel really empowered. And I'm not gonna say that they never disagree with the principal or anything like that, but I think there's much clearer expectations for how they're supposed to work together. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Just two questions for me. I'm interested in finding, if you could, on your breakdown of the funding of school control.
Yep, on the next slide.
Yeah, what is that, non-optional services, district control?
Yep.
Meaning, what is that category?
Great question. So that is things like paying for their fair share of the superintendent's salary and the chief financial officer's salary, paying for facilities maintenance, paying for the HR staff in the district, paying for, like costs associated with food service or, you know, the sort of district level administration.
Okay. And then the other is, has your organization sort of evaluated or seen the private school system itself? And if so, what's your top 5 things in the sense that can be? Obviously, there's some recommendations from this resolution that we're supporting based on the Senate report. But from your perspective, if you have evaluated Providence and say, hey, and I think this is what you're saying, the Providence could actually take advantage of this model. What are the 5, 6 things that you can say that Providence can, based on your evaluation, can implement or benefit from? Yeah.
Great question. And I want to be really. Like, I have not been inside of how this public school is today, so
Fair.
I do not. I've tried to keep informed, but I don't, just as someone who cares about Providence and lives nearby, that I don't, and I'm definitely not an expert. I have read some of the key reports and, you know, try to keep up with the news on all that. My sense is that there's a lot of educators working really hard every day. That there's a lot of people who are who have jobs a lot harder than mine, who are doing really great things, coming up, showing up and trying to work hard on behalf of kids and families. And that's something that we're not going to change. I think my recommendations would be give them clarity of the expectations and more of a voice at the table. So that's not really 5. That's sort of this whole thing, right? Like and support is the third thing I have, right? Because I also think that professional development is such a hard thing in schools because it's something we spend a lot of time on, a lot of money on. Research is not very positive about the effect of professional development, and most educators I know don't always love the PD they get because they don't always feel like it's relevant to what they're worried about at that moment. That you get the, you know, I think this is highly scientific, but I think about if anybody watches that show Abbott Elementary, where they have like the 3rd-year teacher and the 30-year teacher sitting next to each other, having the same exact PD presentation for an hour and a half. And like, that's not super strategic, right? Like there are different places in their understanding of the career. And so what I think is the benefit is, I think that in my experience, not just in Providence, but in lots of places, teachers want more say and they want more support. So it's a tough balancing act, right? Because it's not just, I know what to do. I think a lot of teachers say, I want to know what to do. But I think if you say, let's figure out what is the kind of support that speaks to you and what is the clarity about what your goal, what we're trying to accomplish and what our vision is for a school. Because I think that every grade school I've ever got to visit, everybody, every adult is pretty much on the same page. They may not all be, they may be very diverse in experience, in background, in race, in language, or national, like the languages they speak, whatever. But they have a clarity and vision of this is what we're trying to do with the school. And sometimes those can be really different. Again, I'm macro in English, but like the clarity can be really different. Like you can go to a school that is a Montessori school and says, we're really into sort of like this specific type of learning curriculum that is Montessori aligned, that has these specific rules that look a little different than a traditional classroom. And then you can go to another school that says, we're really aligned, that we're gonna have very clear structured classrooms that run this specific way. It's really different from Montessori school. But the thing that matters, I think, the most is that all the adults are working the same way and agree on what that is. And I think in too many schools, and again, I haven't been in private schools, there's just not that shared vision of like, what is it even supposed to look like in this school? Like what, you sort of know intuitively, oh, Mr. Smith is a really great teacher. People walk by his room and they see that he's doing great things, and stay away from Mr. Matera's room because he's not doing anything in there. But like, that sort of sense of here's what we're trying to be as a school, and here's people that we're choosing who can help us do that more effectively, I think is missing from too many schools. So I hope that's not too like foggy as an answer for you. But like, I think when I think about the benefits of this, it helps you create that clarity in the school, and also potentially tap community resources, because you're bringing in, you go down, Providence is an unmatched city in terms of its civic community, right? Like there's all these great institutions, these great community leaders, these wonderful folks. And I think that sometimes it can be hard to come to somebody, whether it's an institution or an individual, and say, hey, come help out at our school. Like, you can say, like, how, what am I doing? But I think if you say, we want to have a sustained role for you in helping to make these schools great, I think that's maybe a little bit easier to sell. And it helps the educators in the school building feel like they get meaningful support to do their job better.
Thank you. Any other follow-up questions? Councilman Rhodes.
I think, I think two, not really questions, but two thoughts, I guess, is, I just love the aspect of school flexibility and empowering the staff members there. I want to just make sure that, I think the challenge here to roll this out in Providence is making sure teachers don't feel like collective bargaining is being threatened. And so it's gonna be really important to make sure that we're building trust here. And that's gonna be a huge hurdle. The second thought that not really relevant to the first one, but it stood with me. You mentioned that this is not a complete solution, that there's still poverty still exists, trauma still exists. And so, I guess like, why I love this model is like in my own school, teachers are up against poverty, trauma, and these sort of forces outside of the classroom that affect their role as a teacher and their ability to provide instruction. And they're navigating those waters, and they then have to navigate the bureaucracy of central office. It's like a boot on their neck, I don't mean to be so blunt in that way, but we roll, I'm not trying to dog my school here. So it'll be nameless here, but they rolled out a new schedule every day. It rotates, and there's 7 periods. And so at any given day, teachers have to stand before over 100 students in the school day. That is so unsustainable. How do you prep for over 100 new faces every day? It's unrealistic. And central office, no matter what school district, typically rolls out these schedules because it's for financial purposes. It's the limited resources. They standardize school schedules across the district because again, it saves money in some extent. So to some extent, but if we had a tailored schedule that all teachers can buy into, it makes a world of a difference. Like the schedule we have now in my school, it cannot come back next year. I think it's a universal feeling. Cause it's trying to coordinate services for students with a schedule that is not staff friendly. And honestly, not student friendly is unbelievable, so I just wanna say that I think the school flexibility piece is, is so huge. I just think to allow a principal to be a principal and to allow teachers to be teachers. I mean, it's a beautiful thing.
Well, thank you, and I just wanna, like, amen, the first thing you said, I think collective bargaining is really important, and I think that. This is a model that can work well with collective bargaining, you know, I think that. I think both. Labor and management in Springfield have come together to say, how can we be more flexible and figure out how to work together, to do things that might be a little different in some ways. While preserving the collective bargaining is essential, and that, you know, and so, and then there's second point, you know, from what I said, that I agree with you strongly, that flexibility is important, but I also think it's why. Changing where the decision is made matters too, right? Because let's say that your school had a teacher leadership team that came together with a schedule that you actually don't think is awesome for next year. You think it's okay, maybe a little better, but not awesome. You can then talk to the people who made the decision and say, why did you make this decision? And they can say, oh, we made this decision for this reason, we had this constraint, we had this thing. And you know those people, and you can either say, well, I don't think you saw the full picture, maybe you should reconsider. Or you can say, okay, I get it, I don't love it, but I understand why you made that decision, right? And I think that, whereas now, you probably don't know the people who made the decision at central office, right? And like, hopefully they're very well-intentioned, smart people, they probably are, you know, but you don't have that, they don't have that window into what you're doing every day, and you don't have that window into their thought process. That I think it's just nice when you have an ability to understand where decisions are coming from, right? And like, not that you can do anything, right? But like, if you said, even with curriculum, you know, I was talking to a school district and their curriculum process, which strikes me as one of the worst I've ever heard. Oh, I editorialized, is they were trying to choose a new reading curriculum or math, I forget which one. And they had like 10 that they tried out, which is also way too many. And they had like presentations from all of them. And then it's a pretty big district, bigger than like two or three times as big as here. And each school then got a vote on what curriculum the district would adopt, and whichever, it was like an electoral college thing or something, whatever curriculum got the most schools to vote for, that was then the curriculum for every school in the district. Which is just such a terrible system, right? Because you have all of these schools taking the time to decide what they think is best, and then many of them being told, no, you don't get to use the one you thought was best because some number of other schools voted for a different one. I think it's really different than saying, hey, we've done a lot of research and looked, and we found that these are 2 or 3 curricula that match the high standards in research of what works today. And so we're not just gonna say you can do anything, school, but we're gonna say, here's 3 curricula. You as an individual school, you make the decision. You decide, is it more important to you that you're consistent with all the schools across the zone, that get all the teams together and hash out which one you're gonna go? Or is it more important that each of them can do their own one? And that's fine too. Like, you have the decision-making power and no one is gonna tell you, we are gonna set some guardrails, right? Because sometimes people say, there's some really bad reading curriculums out there, like, are we gonna let them choose any reading curriculum they want? I don't know if you've heard the podcast, Told Story, it's an interesting podcast, about some of the really bad reading curriculums out there.
What's it called? I'm just.
It's called Sold a Story.
Sold a Story.
And I full confession, I haven't listened to the whole podcast, but I saw the podcaster speak and she's really engaging. So, you know, you don't have to just say do whatever, but you set the sort of constraints and then people make their decisions within those constraints, right? Same way, if you don't say you get to do whatever you want, you say, here's how much money you have, and then you have to make hard choices, right? Like, that you can't, unfortunately, maybe have 2 extra ELL teachers plus 2 extra social workers plus another assistant principal plus more field trips, right? Like, you have to look and say, what are our priorities and how are we juggling that? Sorry, I'm now it's going off on your company.
Councilman
And I think they're quick ones. The first question is, out of any of the school districts that you've worked with, has there been full buy-in from any, like the whole school district, or is it just like a one-off cluster here? And then it kind of builds that way? That's the first question.
We're pretty new in this. I don't know of any school district that's on the whole district.
Okay. The second question just left me.
There's one in Texas that sort of did, but not really.
Okay.
Hold on.
Oh, no,
Good.
I want to hear the next question is.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm gonna make sure. It's gonna come back.
It's gonna come back.
Okay, I'm all
Okay.
set. I've
Yeah.
had all my questions answered. It's fascinating.
But if you do come back, think about it. Steve, so that way we can start wrapping up.
Well, it might be out there.
The whole committee, a little bit of background and practical problems. Information regarding collective bargaining, district control. In 2014, Dr. Lucy and I were negotiating a contract that really, we, at the time, we didn't know, we didn't know what politics. But through our experience, we tried to do this piece, and we had things, and you're gonna hear. And this is the union mantra, we have site-based management in the contract, we try United Province, and it didn't work, all true. But when you're looking at two scathing reports of the province is one of the worst districts in the country. And so you're not really talking about, Sue and I came to the realization that, look, we point to Gregorian, Nathaniel Green, and Classical. And let me say, clearly, those schools could also see benefits from this type of change. So we decided that we would embark on, instead of piecemealing, because our experience was, okay, for schools that were under federal intervention, we were out of transition models, so we came up with an education management organization. At first, those schools, had the gun to the head, they said, oh my God, at least we're not being closed, we're not gonna be turned into a charter. 50% of the faculty doesn't have to be fired. And then we got into, okay, we're gonna do something different. Well, why do we have to do something different? No one else has to do anything different. Why is our contract gonna be different than the rest of the district? Is that fair? All these machinations. So had we passed that contract, and that contract included all the recommendations. And that contract included our experience with Hope, my experience with Hope High School. Where I had the gun to my head, I was able to go to the faculty and say, you have a gun to your head, we're gonna do something different, and we did, and then it changed back because it was all personality driven. We wanted to get out of the personality driven stuff. So no matter who the superintendent of Providence, no matter who the union president, the expectation and the requirement is that this is what we're doing. So if you want to run for union president, you can't run on a campaign to say, yeah, we're not going to change the word of that contract. And we're going to block every reform. And if you're going to be superintendent, you can't interview and say, you know, I have no interest in working with you. But you're going to change the thinking as a union leader. And the thought, what does a collective bargaining agreement look like from one size fits all? And I'm here to protect you, and I'm here to speak for you. I'm here to support you to make decisions in the best interest of your school and the students you serve. And that's my role. That a contract that is one size and everybody has to be doing the same thing the same way, the same day, no longer serves that purpose. And we had testimony from Saul Rubenstein from Rutgers, when unions were allowed, when teachers were allowed to form a union in the 60s in Rhode Island anyway. and elsewhere in the country, the model they had, the only model they had was the UAW contract for the most part. So they picked the factory model, and then the law, as I said previously, backed that up. It aligned perfectly with state law, that if you're a union, you have control over wages, benefits, and conditions of employment. And some would argue, well, what I have in the conditions of employment list is pretty limited. So I didn't have control over curriculum, culture, budget, all the really things that are necessary to run a school. So I could be responsible for really nothing in terms of the educational progress, but everything in terms of money. As only as it pertains. And when we were going through this process in 2014, we could both see, and we didn't have empowering schools, we had a guy named Pat Dolan that was kind of helping us along. And Councilwoman, you're absolutely right. This requires, we came to the realization early on, even before we started down the path of negotiations, that capacity was going to be essential. That we cannot expect the adults, however well intentioned, just to get this, like turn the light switch on and everyone's going to be self-governed. It's all going to work. But what we learned from Pat Dolan is middle management on both sides, because I had people working in my office and I had building reps. They all saw like, oh my God, this is really going to affect my role. How do I kill this? And not maliciously, but human nature. So central office, they were sitting at the table, and I knew we were on the right path when the chief financial officer was looking at this. Well, this is going to dramatically affect central office. Yep. And to Matt's point, it wasn't about, we weren't trying to find more money, but there's a lot of money there that could really be used at the school, and more importantly, Councilman, we talked in negotiations, having those decision makers at the school where you can partner, you have the flexibility to partner with a community organization.
Right.
That doesn't cost you a dime, because to come into the school during the day, but at least when I was president, that couldn't happen under the existing contract. Because everybody that was working with kids had to be a member of the union. So I couldn't partner with family services and say, come on in to Carnivale Elementary School and work with our most challenging kids. And why they could say, you know what, 26 kids, 26 per pupil, you know, so great, you know what? But we can probably do better if we have the flexibility. Maybe we can put more than that in one classroom if all the kids are on the same page, and then really put resources to the 10 kids that are really struggling. So that, in terms of, yes, collective bargaining is important, but this really requires a rethinking of what that process is. I'm hoping on both sides.
Got the question.
Yes, I
Thank you.
remember. And this, thank you, Steve, I think you started to allude to this, and this was my, my question was for you, actually. How do you see this, how do you envision this for the city of Providence? Like, as far as from soup to nuts, this start all the way down to where it actually starts affecting the students and benefiting the students. What, for me, I see a couple of different ways that it would be really successful, because you've been in this for so long and fully understand what would be an ideal situation where this would be supported and accepted and successful.
And this is going to be painful.
Yeah. I think
Change.
that's an understatement.
People do not like change. And I think I said this to you previously, while unions like to think of themselves as democratic organizations, they really aren't. As you know, you guys are seasoned pros in terms of running for office. It's not an easy thing to do. Campaigning is difficult, running for office is difficult. It's not a natural act. With that in mind, it's not a natural act for having opposition in the union. And it's almost an indoctrination that if, you know, we're all in this together. Division's not good. This, you know, I was told to wait my time. I came within 14 votes, so I'm an anomaly. And I'm not doing this to pat myself on the back, I was just different. I was used to campaigning, I didn't mind, I knew very full well the direction I was gonna move in. I thought the vast majority of my members would support it, and they did, but I had opposition. In 2014, to give you the example of personality driven, I left to take a job. I can say my team, led by Mary Beth Calaro and Jeremy Sensen, et al., were 1,000% behind us. There was an election, it was close. So how does this happen? And this is my takeaways. I was gonna write a book a long time ago, and a really dear friend of mine who's a leader in the field said, what are your takeaways? So I'm starting with the takeaways. You know, I grew up on Hartford Avenue. Never thought I'd be living the life I'm living right now. I have very few regrets growing up from where I came from to where I am. The only regret I have is not passing that 2014 contract. I can't think of another. So that's why I'm doing this. But yes, this is going to require, in my opinion, and Sue's and others, and Andy Rotherham, who's the individual that told me what are your takeaways. You gotta change, you gotta start with creating the possibilities, all this stuff that Matt's talking about when we can happen. So you've got to change the rules of the game. The rules of the game, you have wages, benefits, and conditions of employment. The other superintendent, the school board decides curriculum. There's one contract that everyone has to adhere to. You gotta get rid of that to say, okay, this is what we're gonna do. You're gonna have decision making, and you're gonna learn about accountability. So know that the decisions that you make, you're gonna be held accountable for. And if you're not doing your job, you get a hearing and you have to go. Because in Providence, in an inner city, you can't afford one bad teacher. Sue Lucy would say all the time, your kids went to East Greenwich. She knew if the third grade teacher was weak, she could fill those gaps like that. That doesn't happen in Providence. So you have to have assured quality control. I wouldn't have, let me be blunt, I wouldn't have gone down this path if I thought I represented ineffective teachers. The vast majority of my teachers were unbelievable. And then I think they still are. And principals, God bless them, you know, we came to the realization that you have to have a team of teachers and pay them to take leadership roles. So the principal's not alone on an island, taking orders from somebody in central administration that they may meet once every few months. Make the decisions at the school, but yes, this is gonna take time, and if you don't do the things in that resolution, and let me speak politically, because, you know, the former senator who's chairing this knows how the Senate and the House works. I'm not saying that this resolution is the be all end all, but without the resolution, nothing will happen. And when you're talking about more funding, I think it's a lot easier. I did this when we were negotiating in 2014, behind the scenes. I was up at the State House saying, this is the direction we want to move in. And I didn't speak to everybody, but the people I did speak to said, that's something we can pay for. That's something I'm interested in. Because you just can't go to taxpayers and you just can't go to the state and say, you know what, we want more money and we're not changing a thing. So I think that the simple, I'll leave you with this, there's only really two arguments here. Either you take the position that the laws that we're operating under that was written in last century are working famously for kids in Providence, and they should not change a word. Or we're gonna do something else. And if you do something else, then with a lot of work and a lot of struggle, you can have what they have in Springfield. But I think creating an opportunity that, why should every school in Providence have the ability to make decisions? And have the ability to have parents have a real voice in that decision-making process. And principals feeling like they're not alone, but they're really running a team. And they're gonna be accountable for the results. It's too easy, and you talked about curriculum. And I was at Rogers Middle School, you know, we'd have somebody come in from central office and talk to us like we were 5 years old. And it's like. And they were usually young. And they didn't know what they didn't know. And I said, you know what, we heard this 10 years ago. An old friend of mine used to tell me, Steve, there were no, when I took office, know this, there are no new ideas in education. They just get recycled, and people who don't know any better think they're new.
And I just can't help myself, one sentence of all, but I think that is one reason why educators have trouble getting invested in change. Because they feel like, I've seen so many iterations of this before, and why am I gonna go all in on this one? Because there's gonna be some new young person from the district coming in a year to tell me to do something different. Right. And like, even if this one sounds good, like, ooh, why would I invest my heart in this? And so I think you have to change the structures if you're gonna get different results. I think 99% of education efforts say change the superintendent, maybe change the principal or change some other amount. I think you have to change the structures and how it's actually organized, or it's not.
And I think the downside, the negative side of it also would give some teachers a pass to say, I don't have to say this, I don't own this wasn't my idea, I know it's gonna fail. And my last note is, you know, Tom Brady, not the quarterback, the superintendent, when we had an order to go to criteria-based hirings. And I wanted to negotiate, and he was a former military guy, so he said, I received an order and I have to. Let me explain what's gonna happen here. I'm gonna sue you. And let's say this is a war. I can't win. But you're gonna become an occupying force. And you're not gonna know when bad things happen, but they're going to. So either we can work this out together, or you can tell me where you wanna be served. And I did that. We ended up suing, going to federal court. And we got a mediator to negotiate this. But that was really a decision a union leader made, and then a superintendent made. If you change the rules of the game, then you're not gonna have to worry about, does the superintendent and the union president really wanna work in the best interest of kids and create a district where everyone has a voice and is gonna be held accountable for results at their building. The toughest thing is management letting go and union leadership letting go.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your
Thank you.
presentation, Steve Smith. And also Matthew Montero from Mountain Schools. Very insightful, that's why great conversation and presentation. Now on the resolution, is there any further discussion, any comments that you would like to make, members of the committee? See, doesn't look like it. Any comments?
No,
See
I've
it
said
none?
mine.
Yeah,
Thank you.
seeing none, is there a motion to support the resolution with the recommendations? The motion,
Motion to
Who was
approve
amended?
as amended.
so before us, the resolution before us is the resolution that was presented as amended. The motion has been made by Councilman Justin Royce, seconded by Councilwoman Shelly Peterson. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any abstention? Motion carries. All right, lastly, thank you, and congratulations. I just wanted to say a few words, just overall. You know, we as a body, as a city council have endorsed this resolution. We've sent out letters. And we continue to work with the administration and many of the people that are interested in getting our school back this year. Last night I went to the school board meeting. I was a little bit disappointed, not a little, but a whole lot. I won't go into it. But I think that what's important is that the message is clear from this committee and also from the city council that we support wholeheartedly this Senate, the Special Senate Commission's recommendations. We urge the stakeholders and collaborator to implement some of these recommendations. We understand that we emphasize that is critical and important of the high quality education for all students and supportive environment for educators. And that the preserving of the labor management and preserving the collective bargaining, making sure that everybody's at the table. As Steve was just indicated, I remember I was one of the young people yelling at Steve and also the school board, and I wasn't elected back then, and that was like almost 30 years ago. My son and my kids went through the public school system just as I, and graduating this year at Classical. But we can't help reflect and continue to see that even back then, as a Latino, as an immigrant, we were probably at that time, when I was going to school, we were probably only like 15% of the population. Right now, Latinos make up 70%. Black make 6.5%. Asian, 6.5%. 1% multiracial. As a total, 82% of the minority population. It is a mission of ours, just like Steve was saying, and for me, and for you that are parents now, young parents, I know we don't do it for ourselves, because it's for the future generation. We're gonna stay the course on this. We know that by passing resolutions and just having these conversations, we're not the ones that are running the schools, but we bring light to it, and we wanna make sure that we bring people focus on our schools. We have to say, we get elected to be the voice of our residents, whether it's the district, and now within the province school district, which is a hybrid model, that we continue to hold them accountable. You know, we're all friends, we all know each other. At the end of the day, we make a severe and critical harm to students that don't. Aaron, along with the clerks that have been here for this resolution. I want to make sure that they get recognized as Angela Harris and also Lauren Gutierrez, and of course our city solicitor Rosa Arias there. So thank you. And with that said, I make a motion I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. The motion has been moved and second.
Thinking about it.
She's thinking about it. All those in favor? Meeting adjourned. Thank you.